Well, when you say shenanigans, you're probably meaning, really politely, illegalities.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but it sure smells to high heaven to me.
Well, if you break the law, isn't that illegal?
Well, this budget season, we've been learning that the law is what you can get away with. For example, there's the statute for the tax cap sets out a very clear series of steps. The governing body, in this case, probably the town council, takes a 4/5 vote, and since we have a financial town meeting, a majority have to approve it at the financial town meeting.
To exceed the cap.
To exceed the cap. The town council, especially Councilmember Louise Durfee, in league with Andrew Tights, have been arguing that it's ambiguous. There's a word "also" in there that might mean something else in another statute in Texas, and so it really just needs the majority vote of financial town meeting. In other words, whatever works. Or another example is the school committee has a similar tax cap. They don't control levies, so they can only request 4.5% more. But they've been requested 6% more because they're arguing that we should count federal money as a local contribution and then count the 4.5% increase off of that. So really it becomes a question of
And this
what they can get away with.
6% budget submitted by the school committee seems to me to be in violation of state law. They're only allowed to exceed the previous year's appropriation by 4.5%, and they're at 6%. And of course, as we say, the law in this case seems to be subject to interpretation by them. It seems clear to me. As I say, there's shenanigans they're interpreting.
Now, are you governed under state law? Is there state statutes that govern this whole process?
There are state laws that govern the process, yes, there are. And there are policies set in place by underlings of the government in Providence, the Department of Administration under the governor, to set up the process by which a town may want to have an override.
So in other words, they promulgate
They promulgate, what do you call it?
rules,
Yeah.
their own rules.
Right,
To
to
implement the state statutes.
Yeah, an example.
Is that where the problem, part of it lies too?
Not really,
No,
because
okay.
in fact, there's documentation on, for example, the process that we would have to go through to exceed the cap. There's documentation from the state, from the bureaucrats who run these policies,
Yeah.
saying both have to do it.
But the Tiverton officials apparently are not paying too much attention to that? Is
Right,
that?
well, apparently there was a presentation shortly after the tax cap law was passed, at which some of the lawmakers present said, "Oh no, it's only the town council," or I think it was only the town council has to do it. And Ms. Durfee on the town council continually brings up this PowerPoint presentation from this meeting as if it's a force of law. But
Now, you're going to have this meeting May
May the 8th, Saturday
May-
morning, May the
Say-
8th.
9 o'clock at the
At
school
high school.
auditorium.
Now, all right, let's say you don't get your way. Do you have a next step?
elections,
Oh, election. Okay, so in other words, get rid of all the bums.
exactly, throw the
All
votes
right,
out.
throw the bums out. I've heard this many times. This is an old saying. Does it really happen? Do they get canned?
Well, at the last election, following the 2008 financial town meeting, the one that was stolen, we ran 12 candidates. We elected 11. There is enormous interest in Tiverton now on this subject. People are tired of the nonsense.
But
People are
let me,
tired of
let me ask you this.
unregulated
You ran
taxes.
12 candidates, 11 got elected.
Correct.
On a Tiverton Town Council?
No, 4 got elected to the council, 1 to the school committee, and the balance 5 to the budget committee.
How are the 4 on the council doing these days for you? Are they adhering to,
It's a mixed bag.
It's a mixed bag.
okay, some might, out of the 4, you might be getting some,
In fairness, there was a range of how closely they were associated with us to begin with. Some of them were.
how many on the council to begin with?
7.
All right, so, and you managed to get maybe 4 on there that were
And-
somewhat,
But 2 new, right, 2 new, and, no,
but the council has been unanimous?
No, the vote to exceed the cap that I spoke of on the 12th of April, that vote was 5-2.
All right, so,
So the taxpayer group endorsed, got 4 people elected to the council. 2 of the 4 voted to not go seek the cap.
In your
The
favor.
other 2, went along with the majority. So that's what you got.
so
That's how it
we'll be-
went.
We'll be reconsidering our nomination process for the next election.
There is much at stake at this financial town meeting.
Apparently there
The
is.
9%, I would recommend voters come, they vote against the 9% tax increase, they vote against any recommended tax increase from the floor, ad hoc from the floor. I would also ask them to vote in favor of the Budget Committee recommendation, which is below the 4.5%.
Now, at this meeting, I imagine some of you people here are going to be speaking. Am I correct
I'll
in
be
that?
on the stage as the chairman making the initial motions.
Of
Yeah.
the Budget Committee.
The Budget Committee numbers, I'll be moving them, and my
So-
vice chair will be seconding them.
All
Yep,
right,
and then the people can amend them, up or down.
All right, so people will be allowed to speak. It's a democratic sort of town hall, or whatever you call it.
Correct.
Participative democracy, New England style.
Right, and if you, whether you get your way is another question.
All I'm looking for is a fair vote. 2 years ago, we did not have a fair vote. If we can get a fair vote, we'll be okay.
All right,
Wanted to mention one more thing. One other thing to support, and all the taxpayers should know, that there are two actually taxpayer resolutions on the docket, in the very beginning of the docket. And one of them in particular, the second one on the page, is, you have to read it to really understand it.
will there be an agenda and people can read?
Yep, oh
There'll
yeah,
be-
and it'll all be presented, but what it will do is actually, if it passes, and if the money either for a revenue shortfall from the automobile taxes comes in from the state, or if the state allows the town to tax your car more, if the taxpayers support that resolution and it passes, and then if the money comes in, we find out in August the money's gonna come in, the taxpayers will actually get the money back as a tax refund or a tax credit. Okay, and it's potentially like a 3% reduction on your taxes, so it's huge. So I wanted to mention, support the Budget Committee, but I also wanted to mention specifically that taxpayer resolve, because it could have the effect, if the money comes in and if it passes, of a 3% tax credit or refund, which is huge.
How many people live in Tiverton?
There's about 15,000 people in Tiverton, 11,000 registered voters, and 6,000 homes.
11,000, that's quite a few people out of the 15 that are registered to vote.
Yeah, 11 out of 15.
That seems a very high percentage.
6,000 homes.
But
And
still, at the
6,000.
financial town meeting, you may have 400 people, 800 people. That's why it's so important that anyone interested come, because at these small town meetings, the votes can be decided by 4, 5, or 10 votes. Last year, the vote was decided by 5 votes. The year before, even
12.
using questionable policies, they only won by 12.
Yeah, you would think, one would think it would behoove people who live in Tiverton, property owners, and even renters, because rent, is based on the taxes that the landlord has to pay. The more taxes the landlord has to pay, the more rent they have to charge. So any registered voter, it would seem that they'd want to be at the meeting to voice their...
And taxes always go up, they never go down. So we'll hear nonsense about it's only a cup of coffee. Well, if you keep adding the cups of coffee over the past 10 years, it's a doggone car payment or house payment now in Tiverton.
Yeah.
So people need to come, they must vote no for the 9% tax increase.
Now, we're getting down to the end, but you mentioned that Tiverton is one of the highest taxed communities in the state of Rhode Island. How, briefly, because it's gone by pretty quick, how did this happen?
People not paying attention, basically, and policies that people on the council preferred just kept getting implemented year over year, and it slowly ground to this point.
And let's be frank, there are powerful interests in the state. We saw it last week in Providence when the governor made some very, very reasonable request for pension reforms. They were slapped down. The cracked the whip by the special interests, and they all backed down.